Ale fue diagnosticado el año pasado, en septiembre específicamente, con cáncer cerebral. Y desde ese momento nosotros comenzamos a darle seguimiento a lo que era su estado y viendo cómo iba evolucionando, qué pasaba con él. Lamentablemente hoy, pues, cerca de las 9 de la mañana, pues recibimos esta triste noticia que luta a toda la República Dominicana.
They kept it quiet, real quiet, and the people closest to him, they knew for months, and not one word made it out to the public until it was too late. Alex Bueno is gone. And look, before I tell you everything, I need you to understand something. This isn't just a story about a man dying. This is a story about what happens when the music industry, the inner circles, the managers and the gatekeepers decide that your truth isn't theirs to share, but also isn't yours to know. And by the time you get to the end of this, you're going to feel exactly what I felt when I first put all of this together, because you already suspected something was off. You already felt it. You know, just like I know that when someone of this magnitude disappears from public life without explanation, there's always more to it. Always. Alex Bueno wasn't just a singer. I need you to really hear that. He wasn't just some merengue guy from the Dominican Republic that maybe your parents played at family parties. This man was a force, a complete, once-in-a-generation musical force who could walk into any genre. Merengue, salsa, bachata, balada, and absolutely own it. Not just perform it. Own it. There are artists who dabble, and then there are artists who conquer. Alex Bueno conquered every room he ever walked into, every stage he ever stepped onto, every studio booth he ever sat down in. Here's the thing though, the music industry doesn't like that kind of power when it can't control it. He came from San Jose de las Matas, the mountains, the Sierra, a place far removed from the glittering labels and the Manhattan deals and the executives in their offices deciding who gets pushed and who gets buried. He came from the people, and the people loved him back with everything they had. His shows in New York, and I mean here in the Bronx, in the heart of Dominican New York, those weren't concerts, those were events. People who were there describe it like a curfew had been called. Toque de queda, they said, a lockdown. Because when Alex Bueno performed in New York, nobody was going anywhere else. The whole city stood still. But before I get to what they hid, let me paint you the full picture, because context is everything here. Alex Bueno emerged in the 1970s. Think about that era. The Dominican music scene was raw, hungry, alive with possibility, and deeply tied to identity for a diaspora that was building itself in cities like New York and Boston and Miami. He wasn't just entertainment. He was a cultural anchor. He was the sound of home for people who were far from home. And he carried that responsibility not just for a year or two, but for decades. Decade after decade of hits. A catalog so deep, so wide, that insiders who knew him personally said he could perform for 3 hours straight, 3 hours, without repeating a single song. All hits. Every single one. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. When was the last time you heard of an artist in this era who could do that? Not with a setlist padded with filler. Not with covers or remixes propping things up. Pure original, beloved music. 3 hours of it. And the reason that matters is this. An artist at that level doesn't just fade. They don't just quietly step back. When someone like Alex Bueno goes silent, something happened. And the question nobody was asking loud enough was, what? Here's where it gets interesting. His manager's name is Jordi. Remember that name. Because Jordi is a central figure in what I'm about to tell you. People inside the industry who were close to Alex. Journalists who had relationships with his camp. TV hosts who had been planning major appearances with him. All of them started hitting the same wall around the same time. Requests were going unanswered. Bookings were being quietly pulled. And when questions got too direct, Jordi would reach out personally. Not to answer. To ask for discretion. Discretion. Think about that word. Not Alex is resting. Not Alex is taking time for his family. Discretion. That's the word used when the truth is something that could crack things open if it got out too soon. And look, I want to be real with you for a second here. I want to slow down just for a moment. Because there's something about this story that hits differently for me personally. When I really sat down with all of this. The timeline, the silences, the carefully managed non-answers. I felt something heavy, not just sadness. Something that felt like anger. Because Alex Bueno gave everything. His voice, his time, his talent. His entire life poured into a music that carried people through joy and heartbreak and immigration and loss and celebration. He gave it all, and what he got in return, in his final chapter, was secrecy. Was people around him managing his story like it was a liability to be contained rather than a life to be honored. That's wrong. And I think you feel that too. Now here's what they actually knew and when they knew it. October 15th. That's the date you need to hold on to. October 15th of last year, Alex Bueno was scheduled to appear on a major television program. Everything was set. The production was built around him, a full program, dedicated entirely to celebrating his legacy. And then the morning of October 15th, the call came in. Alex wasn't coming. No real explanation. Just, he's not coming. And the host, someone who'd had a genuine relationship with Alex for years, was frustrated at first. You would be too. You build an entire show around someone and then they cancel day of with no real reason. That's unprofessional on its surface. Except it wasn't unprofessional. It wasn't careless or disrespectful. It was something else entirely. Because when Jordi finally reached out and explained, quietly, carefully, asking again for that word, discretion, everything changed. That was the day Alex Bueno had a serious relapse. And after that day, he never fully recovered. Now let me give you the diagnosis because this is the part that was buried deepest. Alex Bueno had been diagnosed with brain cancer. Not recently, not in his final weeks. He was diagnosed in September of the year before he passed. That means for over a year, the people around him knew, the inner circle knew. And a careful, deliberate decision was made to keep it from the public, not from cruelty. I don't think it was cruelty, but it was control, it was management. It was the machinery of the music industry deciding that Alex Bueno's illness was information to be rationed, shared only when necessary, shared only when asked directly, and when the asker could be trusted to stay quiet. And most of them did stay quiet. Most of them honored the request. Journalists who found out held it. Hosts who learned the truth kept it off the air. But here's the question nobody wants to answer. Who made that decision? Who decided that the millions of people who loved Alex Bueno, who had danced to his music at their weddings and cried to his ballads after breakups and felt his voice in their bones at family gatherings across New York and Boston and Santo Domingo, who decided those people didn't deserve to know? Who decided that the public's love for this man was conditional on the public being kept in the dark about his suffering? Because I'll tell you what that does. It doesn't protect the artist. Not really. What it does is protect the brand. It protects the image. It protects the commercial value of a legacy by keeping that legacy untouched by the reality of mortality. And that's not for Alex. That's for the business around Alex. Actually, let me rephrase that because I want to be precise here. Some of the people who kept that silence did it out of genuine love and respect. I believe that. I believe Jordi, his manager, made some of those calls from a place of wanting to protect a man he cared about. But the system, the broader machinery of how the music industry handles its legends, that system made it easier to bury this than to face it. And that system is the thing that deserves to be questioned. Now, here's the part that broke me a little. A journalist who had a chance to sit with Alex Bueno at the Dominican parade in Boston last year described what he saw. He said Alex was there. He was present. He was smiling, always that warmth that you'd know if you ever saw him perform. But he was slower. His responses weren't sharp the way they used to be. The quick wit, the verbal agility, the electric energy, it was muted. And this journalist knew, watching him sitting there on a bus waiting for his turn to perform, that something was deeply wrong. And yet Alex Bueno was still there, still showing up, still performing, fighting through brain cancer to stand on a stage and give people what they came for. You tell me what that is if not a hero. He could have stayed home. He could have retreated quietly and nobody would have blamed him. But that's not who Alex Bueno was. He was from the Sierra. He was built different. The man recorded an entire album's worth of guide vocals in a single night, and those vocals were so perfect, so naturally effortless, that the producers used them in the final mastered production. Think about what that means. His guide tracks, the scratch recordings meant just to map out a song, were better than most artists' final takes. That's not talent, that's a gift, a divine gift. And you don't waste a divine gift by hiding at home when the music is still alive inside you. So he went to Boston. He sat on that bus. He smiled. He performed. And nobody watching knew the full weight of what it was costing him. Now I need you to connect something for me, because this is the part that makes everything make sense. Alex Bueno spent his entire career at the intersection of joy and authenticity. He picked songs that were, by the accounts of people who knew him personally, genuinely clean, genuinely human. Songs for families, songs for celebrations, songs that children could sing and grandparents could cry to and young lovers could slow dance to. In an industry that increasingly rewards shock value and darkness and explicit content, Alex Bueno held a line. He kept making music that felt like something sacred. And that choice, that insistence on purity of expression, is exactly what made him beloved by people who are often ignored by the mainstream music machine. And the mainstream music machine, right on cue, didn't give him his flowers while he was living. They saved the tributes for when they couldn't be refused. The labels, the industry press, the institutions that could have been shouting about this man's legacy for years. They were largely quiet. While Alex Bueno was fighting brain cancer and still showing up to parade stages to perform for his people, the industry that profited off his genius was looking the other way. Here's what I know, and here's what I think you know too. When someone like Alex Bueno is diagnosed with a terminal illness and the people around him immediately begin managing the information, controlling the story, rationing the truth, asking journalists for discretion. That tells you something about the system he was operating in. It tells you that even at the end, even in the most human and vulnerable moment a person can experience, the machinery doesn't stop. The image management doesn't stop. The calculation of what information serves the brand and what information damages it, that calculation doesn't stop. And the fans, the millions of people across the Dominican Republic and New York and Boston and Puerto Rico and Colombia and everywhere else his music traveled, they were the last to know. Always the last. The people who bought the records and packed the shows and carried his voice in their hearts for 50 years. They found out when it was over. That's the truth they hid. Not just the diagnosis. Not just the timeline, but the simple, devastating reality that the people who loved Alex Bueno most were trusted with his truth last. While insiders quietly asked each other for discretion, while managers sent careful messages asking hosts not to report what they knew, the fans were left with no information. No chance to send their love while he could still feel it. No chance to celebrate him while he was still here to be celebrated. And I want to ask you something directly, because I think this matters. What does it say about this industry? What does it say about the way we treat our legends? That a man who gave 50 years of his life to a music that kept an entire culture alive had to fight the last year of his life in secret? What does it say that the people entrusted with his story decided the public couldn't handle it? What does it say that his final TV appearance was canceled not because he didn't want to show up, but because his body was failing him? And even then, the full story was kept locked down behind a wall of carefully managed silence. Alex Bueno is gone. His voice is gone. And the reason for that, well, you already know the reason. Brain cancer took him. But the silence around it, that was a choice. And choices have people behind them. And those people are still out there, still managing other artists, still deciding what you're allowed to know and when you're allowed to know it. So I'll ask you the question directly right here, right now. Do you believe that the fans, the real fans, the people who give their money and their time and their emotional investment to these artists, do you believe those fans deserve to know the truth in real time? Or do you believe that the industry has the right to keep its legends hidden, protected, managed, controlled, right up until the moment there's nothing left to protect? Tell me in the comments, because I think you already have an answer. And I think Alex Bueno, if he could speak right now, would want you to say it out loud.